when you read about $100,000 payment, allegedly, all that, for losing games, what was your thought?
Yeah, I'm glad that we went there, Dan, because everybody's focused on, is there a collusion, racist collusion element? And believe me, that'll be, adjudicated in the court of public opinion. There's going to be stuff that happens with that potentially legally. But the real issue, like you just said, is the fact that there could be, being paid for losses, which, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, that's essentially fixing games.
It's
fixing outcomes. So there's no difference between, the stuff that happened in the NBA, paying officials, paying players, baseball, playing basketball, football, whatever. Like whether you're paying a coach, paying a player, paying someone to fix the outcome of a game, that's criminal. And it's criminal in the lives of the federal government. The FBI will be digging into this. And, if there's any way Brian Flores can substantiate those $100,000 payments, whether it's with other witnesses, maybe a text message, if there's any evidence to speak to that, that's going to be the real issue that the NFL has to deal with. Because, Dan, there were 50 million people that averaged watching those games on Sunday for 7 hours. That is a seventh of the U.S. population that put in literally a full day's work on Sunday watching the NFL. 7 straight hours. It's peaking at 60 million with the Chiefs and Bengals. And they watch the game because they're competitive, they're invested, and now there's gambling on them. And they believe that the games, and as much as we can complain about bad officiating calls, stupid calls by coaches, guys dropping passes, whatever it might be, you believe the games are played fairly and everybody involved is trying to win. And so if you lose that, or even if there's the thought, the inference that there's impropriety in it, that is a massive issue for the NFL, who for so long, Dan, was against gambling. We can't, put lines on there. And, you worked, at other networks where, hey, you can't talk about this spread. You can talk about being favored and you couldn't use gambling terms. Well, now they're all in. Spreads are all over the place. NFL's putting it out there. They've got sponsorships from casinos, everything else. They're tethered to gambling. And if you start looking at this is what people would fear, that, hey, if there's an owner doing this with the Dolphins, I mean, I put that out on Twitter, the amount of different fan bases, like, well, do you think this was happening here? This coach? Do you think that, they make a bad call, they blame it on analytics now? Are they actually trying to win the game? And so that's the exact thing the NFL doesn't want to see happen, from a public perception element, and then also that legal and federal element.
Yeah, nobody's saying that the racist element isn't important. It's very important, and that will you have to prove that. That's going to be interesting. But to the gambling point, Bobby, here's what I read, and you tell me if I'm off base on this. I read where basically Brian Flores said that he was offered $100,000 to lose games, and he basically said no. Then Hugh Jackson, in my opinion, idiotically, if that's a word, jumps in and says, hey, I was. And it sounds like he took the money. Am I reading this right? Flores looks like I was offered but said no. Jackson, for whatever the reason, put the cuffs on himself almost.
So what's interesting about that is Brian Flores came out. It was a very specific amount, $100,000 per loss for a desired outcome. Now, I will say this before we get into it. Everybody understands, and goes to the Hugh Jackson point, where, hey, we were a young team. I'm saying we don't look like we're very good. We need to add some players. Everybody understands in sports, when you're building a team, you're going to generally build through the draft, develop a good young core of nucleus. You're going to struggle a little bit, develop. And then as you get better, you start adding those key free agents, and you want to be low on the salary cap initially, so you have space to pay your guys as they improve. Like that's the formula, regardless of the sport. So everybody understands that. So, Hugh Jackson's just throwing out there like, hey, we were bad. He was 1-31. He's like, they're bonusing us out at the end of the season for losing, and this and that. But he didn't really have specifics, and he wasn't really able to tie it to something. Here's the thing for these coaches as they're talking about this. If instead of being bonus for losing, be like, hey, I'm going to play the young guys. We're still trying to win the game. The players are going to try to win, but we're going to be really putting ourselves at a talent deficit, understanding that, we're going to get better and we will improve eventually, but we're still going to actively try to win with the players on our roster. If I'm the coach, I'm saying, hey, I'll do that for you. I don't want $100,000 a loss. I don't want that crap. Give me 2 more years on my contract so that I can see the end of this darn thing and the light at the end of the tunnel. And if you want to fire me, you're not paying me $100,000 a loss. You're going to pay me another 2 or 3 years at like $5, $6, $7 million. Like that's the way that should have been handled. And so I hear that, Dan. I'm like, Hugh Jackson, like you just sound like an idiot. He has gone on. He's a nice guy, and I don't think he's the worst coach in the world. But he has gone out of his way, Dan, to try to abdicate responsibility for the product that was on the field for the Cleveland Browns. And yes, no one was expecting him to go 12-4, but they were really bad. And you go watch some of the end of game situations where they had chances to win games. It literally looked like he probably was taking money, and I don't believe that he was.